Hi everyone, welcome to the Bible Project podcast on our journey together through the book of Genesis. You'll have been noticing, I would suspect you've been noticing that I've been recording these videos live recently face to face. So if you'd like to give me some feedback, if you'd like me to keep doing it this way, or you prefer I go back to the old way where I just did the visual images with the audio version of the soundtrack as a soundtrack for the podcast. So maybe put a note in either the YouTube or the Facebook, or contact me through the various through Patreon to say which you prefer doing. Exciting news is I plan in the new year, Lord willing, providing the country doesn't go back into another lockdown, to record some of these episodes of the podcast back to back in a church environment where they'll be videoed with illustrations and slides, and we'll try that now and again to see how it works out, and we'll see what I'd really appreciate your reaction on that if it happens, and when it happens, probably in a month or 6 weeks time. So again, give me feedback about that. Anyway, you're very welcome. Today we're arriving at Genesis chapter 12, and over the next sort of 4, 5 perhaps podcasts, we'll be looking at the verses, the section containing verses 10 to 20. And in the opening to this, I'm going to be dealing with what about failure in life, failure in the Christian life. And I've called this introduction today, When You Feel Like You've Failed. Now, as some examples of failure in the secular world are situations like there was quite a famous battle in 1788 called the Battle of Carnassies, and in it the Austrian army attacked itself and killed nearly 10,000 of its own men. Other examples of things going wrong are in 1867, Russia sold Alaska to America for 2 cents an acre because they described it as a useless tundra. Of course, Alaska is now recognized as one of the richest areas of the world when it comes to the mining of oil and precious minerals. In 1963, Decca Records turned down the Beatles and saying, and I quote, "Guitar groups are on the way out and the Beatles have no future in show business." They were, of course, subsequently signed that same month to EMI, and we all know what happened there. And as recently in 2014, NASA lost communication with their Mars orbiter, and that was later found out because one half of the communication team had used metric and the other half had used imperial measurements in the interface that they designed between 2 very small, cheap electrical components. So these are all examples of failure in human terms, or institutional failure. But let's make this a little more personal, and I'd like to ask each and every one of us listening to this, have you ever failed? And as a Christian, have you ever felt like you failed? Have you ever failed by breaking one of God's commandments, by doing something like lying or cheating or worse? Have you ever failed the Lord by gossiping or by criticizing another believer or by deliberately undermining the work or mission of another Christian? So the question this morning is, what happens when as Christians we fail? And on a wider level, what about when a relationship fails? Have you ever let down your family? Have you ever let down someone you love? Well, the high level of relationship breakdown and divorce in today's society suggests a very high level of failure across all family lines and many different personal relationships. But the real issue is, how does your failure affect you as an individual and your relationship with God? When as a Christian believer you fail to meet God's standard, how does it affect your relationship with yourself, with other people, with other believers? But most importantly, how does failure to meet God's standard affect your relationship with the Lord? Some people out there teach that when a Christian fails or falls into sin, they can lose their salvation. So is that true? What happens when we fail in our obedience to the Lord's commandments? Is it really game over for us? Now, there are many passages across the whole Bible, many in the New Testament, where we could look at this. But at this moment, as you know, we're going through the book of Genesis, and it's worth noting that in this chapter 12, here described for us as one of the classic incidents of failure in the Bible. So it's going to be helpful to look at this. And of course, it concerns our old friend Abram, who is about to have his name changed to Abraham, in fact. And it begins in verse 10. Let me just begin by reading chapter 12, verse 10 to you. It says, "Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while, because the famine was so severe." So the first thing we're told at the opening of this section is that there's a famine in the land, a severe famine in the land where God had told Abraham to go. And it seems at this point that Abraham faced a choice. He had a decision to make, didn't he? So what were his options? Well, number one, I suppose he could have just said, "I'm trusting the Lord, and I'll just stay here." Would that have been the correct option? He could have remembered that the Lord had already revealed himself to him and provided him with guidance up to this point, and told him that this is where he was meant to be, so he could have stayed there and trusted the Lord. The second option, he could leave this land, the land where God had placed him, and he could go across into Egypt, where the famine wasn't so severe, in the hope of finding food and water. Well, we're going to look at the choice he made in the next episode. So I'll see you all here again very soon on the Daily Bible Project podcast. And just a quick reminder that you can access all the different links and all the different ways of connecting with this ministry through both the daily Bible study website, the weekly compilation episode, as well as the Facebook page and the YouTube channel. Many ways you can contact and connect with us. So you'll find the links to do that within the episode notes section of any audio version of the podcast. That's probably the easiest way to do it, but there are also some links in the video details on the YouTube channel. And there's also ways there that you can connect with the ministry and support it if you want, as well as a place where you can access the music and the background sounds that I create for this podcast and other projects I'm involved in. So thank you so much for joining you, and I'll see you all very soon on the Daily Bible Project podcast. Bye for now.